Hey everyone, Suntide here, and welcome back to our Rune Factory 4 special crafting series. In this video, we'll be talking about all of the best equipment in the game, and basically how we make them and what they actually are. So we're going to put together everything we've learned so far in the series to create the best possible builds. This video shouldn't contain really any spoilers. We'll be looking at some of the materials and stuff which might be considered spoilers, but it should be mostly spoiler free. We aren't going to go anywhere. And yeah, so I strongly recommend you look through the other videos in the series first, just because we will be talking about a lot of the stuff we've seen in those, but I'll be sure to basically just give a quick revision whenever we really need something. So yeah, let's get straight to it. But first of all, basically in this video we're going to be talking about really what is the best equipment. Like, how do we actually figure out if equipment is good or not? What do we actually want in good equipment? And then we'll talk about the sort of base equipment, the equipment that you want to basically build first before you upgrade them. And then we're going to create our sort of final builds, putting everything together. So first up, what do we actually care about? And what are the stats? Like, stats are important, but what are they? So you can see it on the right side of the screen in the menu. There's a whole bunch of them. So we have attack, defense, magic defense, strength, vitality, and intelligence. So the four sort of actually important ones, the four ones that actually do things, are attack, defense, and magic defense. So the first two just increase the damage you deal. Higher numbers increase your damage by that amount in general. There are some multipliers around, but basically 1 point of attack, 1 point of damage. Defense and magic defense are the opposite. 1 point of defense, 1 less point of damage. Again, after multipliers and stuff like that. So these are the ones that you basically want to increase, but we also have these other things. So strength, intelligence, and vitality. This is pretty simple. Basically, 1 point of strength increases your attack by 1 point. That's it. Same deal for intelligence. For vitality, you add half your vitality to your defense and your magic defense. So it goes to both, but its effect is halved. So yeah, if we just can increase our strength, that's just like increasing our attack, sort of. Another important thing is that food often acts as a multiplier, so it might increase your strength by like 50%. And it increases your strength, not your attack. So it increases your strength, and your strength increases your attack. But basically what this means is that if you can increase a point of strength, that's better than increasing the point of attack directly, because the strength can get multiplied, and the attack will be multiplied after. Basically, strength is more important than attack, thanks to food. Same deal for intelligence and magic attack. So yeah, increase these ones first. So for increasing these, you want to use firearm scales, dragon fins, or earthworm scales. They increase each by 300, which is very good. Basically, this does sort of mean we want to free up as many slots as possible to fit either firearm scales or dragon fins. And if possible, we want to use our 10-fold steals on these items. Remember that 10-fold steals multiply the effects of the lost item by 8. So using those 2 slots, you can get 9 items. So ideally, we want to be able to use 10-fold steals plus our item on every single material, on every single equipment, which is going to be hard, but sometimes doable. And yeah, so we have the dragon fins for increased intelligence, and we have the firearm scales for increased strength. So yeah, if we can, we use these. Earthworm scales aren't usually going to be that good. Vitality isn't going to be as important as the others for a few reasons. Mainly, it's better to do damage than take less damage. If you can kill them first, they can't hurt you. The fact it's half is also a bit annoying, but also there are other ways we can increase our survival. We can increase our survival thanks to resistances, which are very important. So remember that each of these resistances reduce our damage by some proportion, and if our resistance goes above 100%, we absorb that instead. So if we have 110% fire resistance, we'll start healing from fire attacks by 10%, which is very good. Now the best way you can use those are through these items called Mealy Apples. Using these to upgrade items with an object X increases your resistance to 6 of those statuses, 6 of those elements by 10%, which is very good. Everything except for love and no res. Of course, Mealy Apple isn't the only thing. We can use some specific materials, like these big crystal flowers, which increase A-type by 20%. which is quite good. So we can use those, and yeah, that's one way we can do things. We can also use some other items. You can use super fatal dishes for increasing light res, and we can use tyrant turnips for increasing love res. What's a bit weird is that there are no items that increase dark res. No upgrade materials increase dark res. You have to use Mealy Apples or specific equipment. And also there is also non-elemental damage, so damage that isn't actually an element, and you can increase resistance to those with your 4 cores. So these guys, you use 4 of them and you increase your resistance by 10%. This means you can add up to 50%. So the bit of problem here is that it's very, very expensive to increase. You need 4 slots to increase something by 10%, which is very, very hard. Basically, so these 6, very easy to increase. You really should get them to 100+%. Maybe not dark, if you don't care about that, just because it's harder. No resistance you should increase because it's so common, but that's very, very hard, so that's up to you. Love res is very, very rare. Not many enemies use love attacks, and the fact that it's not increased by Mealy Apple means you need to make a conscious decision to increase your love res. If you think it's worth it, you can with tyrant turnips or your base equipment, but that's up to you. So this is where we start to see that there are a lot of questions that you need to ask yourself when optimizing your equipment. Like, do you care about love res? Do you care about no res or dark res? These ones are easy, but what about these guys? You know? So there's a lot of important questions here. Okay, so just a quick bit more on Mealy Apples. Basically, remember that Mealy Apples grant 10% of each resistance per use, which is quite nice, but remember that each time we use the same material when we're upgrading, the effect is halved. So we can avoid that to some extent by using them when we're crafting. If you use them when we're crafting, we can use up to 2 extra ones. The first slot needs to be an object X. And then you can use a third one when you're doing the upgrading for the full effect. You can put them on headgear, armor, and shields when crafting for their full effect. You can't put them on weapons because they can't get resistances. And accessories and shoes often want to inherit abilities instead of using Mealy Apples. Basically, this means we're going to use 9 at full strength, which means the extra ones you'll use have weaker effects. So you'll probably want to keep that in mind if you want to use a lot of Mealy Apples. We're going to often try to mitigate that with other equipment for the most part. But we'll see. We'll see that soon. Okay, so that's all that about elemental resistances, but there's a few more things. We might also care about status resistances. So there are 8-ish statuses in the game, or there's 8-ish things you can get resistance to. So poison, seal, paralysis, sleep, fatigue, and sick are all probably your normal statuses, and they can be increased with a few different things. Left rock shards, broken boxes, things like that. So these last two though, faint and drain, can't be. So drain is basically useless. Drain resistance is how much you can stop enemies from healing when they attack you. If they do heal, they're not going to heal from very much, and basically it's just a waste of slots to prepare for. So I wouldn't really bother with that. Faint is a bit more interesting. So faint will kill you instantly, to just kill you, and that's very, very bad. Luckily though, very few enemies actually do use faint. So yeah, if you think you can dodge their feint attacks, there's not much point building the feint. Some bosses do have feint attacks though, so yeah, it's up to you. I think feint res is worth building just because I don't want that random chance of dying. But if you're confident in your ability to dodge those attacks, you could save an extra slot just by not using it. So yeah, it's up to you. Also, Talisman throws a few things more complicated. Basically, if you recall, Talisman is an accessory that lets you reverse the effects of some statuses, specifically poison, paralysis, fatigue, and sick. So you don't need to build up resistances to those. However, you still need to build up resistances to seal, sleep, and faint. Not really drain though. So yeah, you need to think about how you're going to do that if you use that. But yeah, so basically, poison, these 6 are important. Faint less so, and drain not at all. And it's up to you to decide how to build that. So that's another set of questions. And one more set of questions are these things that I call reactions. So there are 4 of them: Dizzy, Crit, Knock, and Stun. We'll ignore Dizzy. We'll ignore Crit for now and just talk about Dizzy first. So Dizzy is basically when enemies start getting like birds going around their head. If they're hit too many times in quick succession, they'll be immobile for a bit. It's not too useful. I don't think it's useful at all. Just because if you're going to hit them that many times, they're probably going to die, or they're not that much of a threat, and it doesn't work on bosses. The other 2 are arguably more useful though. So Knock is how far away enemies are hit if you hit them. So let me go outside. So I talked about this in the weapons video, but basically, if I try and knock this guy away, oops. If I try and knock this guy away, I can hit him very, very far. So yeah, that's Knock. Knock is quite useful for that. Okay, the next one is going to be Stun. And Stun is how long the enemy shakes. So if I... So you can see that when I hit him, he's just gonna like stay in place for a while. Or her, I don't know which gender. It's an apple. Yeah, so if you hit the enemy, they'll shake for a bit, and it gives you more time for openings. So Knock can be good or bad. So Knock being the one that hits enemies further away. If enemies are in your face and you want them far away, Knock can be really good. But if you're using an attack like, the dual blades and you're trying to hit the enemy lots of times really, really fast, you might accidentally knock them away. So you might not want Knock in that situation. Stun is a bit more generally useful just because the enemy will stay in place and stuff like that. So yeah, I like Stun a bit more, but that's ultimately up to you. Now the last one, Crit, is very, very interesting. Crit is arguably the most important thing you can get in your build. So this Claymore has max Crit. Actually, I'll show you my normal Claymore first. So this is my normal Claymore, and if I try and attack this apple, I'm doing like 2-digit damage. I'm doing less than 100 damage per hit. But you saw me just land 1 crit there, and I landed about 2,000, 3,000 damage. If I use the Claymore that has 100% critical, you can see that more clearly. I have a few hits that do like 2-digit damage, and then 1 hit that does like, 3,000. So crits ignore enemy defense, and that is incredibly good for doing lots and lots of damage, especially if their defense is very, very high. So for boosting damage, crit is incredibly important, and even more important than actual attack. So you basically need some way to ignore enemies' defense. However, crit isn't the only way you can increase enemies' defense. Ignore enemies' defense. You also have this item called Strange Pendant, which I forgot to make. Oops. So I'm going to make that quickly in the accessory crafting table. So make accessories, and there's this item called Strange Pendant, which takes 85 skill levels, so it's pretty high. But it's very, very good. And Strange Pendant does the same thing. So I haven't equipped it yet, but okay, so remember that when I used the high critical attacks, I did a few hits that were 2 digits and 1 hit that was 3,000. Now if I swap that for my normal Claymore, the Claymore without extra crit, and then I use the Strange Pendant, see what happens here. So here, you can see I do, most of my hits do that sort of 2,000 damage, including that last hit. You can see that here. So, Strange Pendant ignores enemy defenses as well, but on every hit. So, I've summarized the main points here. So, basically, Strange Pendant, you need an accessory slot, which is pretty bad. For critical, you can use upgrade slots, so it's a bit easier to build for. But the big problem is that critical doesn't work on every attack. So when I used Million Strike, only the last hit I used landed a critical hit. Every other hit I did very little damage. For Strange, everything I hit, including the ones that don't critical, do full damage. So it works for everything. So it's actually much better for dealing damage, especially if you're using rune abilities. If you're just using normal attacks, it doesn't matter, they're equally the same. But there are other differences. So the big issue as well for critical is that critical hits can be resisted. So enemies can have critical resistance, especially bosses, and that can reduce their damage by a lot. Strange can't be resisted, so that's a point in its favor. The other problem though is that Strange reduces your defenses to 0. That means you are very, very squishy. and you are very, very likely to die if you aren't careful. You can still resist attacks, so if you're fighting elementals, there's no issue with Strange, you're going to keep healing, but for non-elemental attacks, you might have a lot of trouble. Basically, the stronger the enemies, the better Strange is. Critical is nice if they're less strong, but up to you, it's ultimately your own decision. Of course, you can also pick neither. You don't need any of them. If your attack is high enough, it's not going to make a difference. But there are also attacks that ignore your enemy's defenses. So the big example is going to be Straight Punch, which is a Rune ability. So if I use my normal Claymore without Strange Pendant, and I try and punch this enemy, I deal 6,000 damage. Basically, these attacks just ignore enemy defense, and they're good for that. But they are very rare, so I wouldn't fully rely on that. But yeah, again, you don't need critical or strange. They'll just generally boost the damage of a lot of your attacks. Now, you can also defend against these reactions. So you can defend against Dizzy, Crit, and Knock. Nothing increases your stun resistance, or at least no upgrade materials do that. So yeah, but arguably these aren't going to be too useful for you. So Dizzy Res can be useful, but it's sort of the opposite with enemies, where if you're going to get Dizzy from an enemy, you're probably going to die anyway. Crit Res can be useful to avoid being accidentally one-shot. Of course, if you're using Strange Pendant, Crit Res doesn't matter for the same reason that Crit doesn't matter, because you're going to ignore defense anyway. And Knock Res can be nice. It can keep you in the enemy space so they won't hit you away, but also you might actually want some low Knock Res to be hit away from the enemy so you're safe. Ultimately, again, this is all up to you. So with reactions done, let's just bring it all together. Basically, as you can see, there's a lot of questions we need to ask ourselves. You know, fire, water, earth, wind, light, and dark res are very important and easy to build, but you know, do we want no res despite it taking up so many slots, despite needing to use those 4 cores just for 10%? And do we want to use love res despite the fact that it's A, quite hard to build, and B, not many enemies actually use love attacks? And you know, with with status resistances, do we want to build faint res despite the fact very few enemies use it? Do we want to get drain res just for the completion's sake, just to be able to say we are immune to everything? And you know, will we use Talisman or not? Other questions, you know, how are we going to increase our damage? Are we going to do the critical? Are we going to use the Strange Pendant? Or are we going to use neither? Do we want to increase our Diz, Knock, and Stun for our attacks? Or do we want the resistances? And which of these do we care about? And also, what about our weapons and accessories? There are questions there as well. So, you know, what element do we want? Do we want Shadestone? Check out the weapons video for that. What status attacks do we use? How much drain do we want? Drain can be important for survivability, but it's up to you how much you want to use. What sort of range do you want? And are you going to increase your range with Glitter All Guide, which can use a lot of slots, but might decrease your attack value? Or Art of Attack, which can use an accessories a lot. More trade-offs. And you know, are we going to use a farm tool? Should we use the Dew Pendant as an accessory? Stuff like that. So we have all those questions. And they're all important in our builds. So try and keep your answers to those in mind. For now, in this video, we're going to talk about the sort of base equipment we're going to build off, so the normal equipment, before we upgrade them. I'm going to go through each in turn. So first up, let's talk about the armor. Luckily, there's only one really good armor in this game, and that is the 4 Dragon Vest. So this one has the highest defenses, but what's really good is it grants resistances to fire, water, earth, and wind, which is very nice. 5% isn't very big, but it's something. Basically, this is enough to save a Mealy Apple, if you can increase your light and dark res. If you can't, it doesn't do anything for your slot efficiency, but even then, 5% res is always going to be nice. It's going to help you heal or absorb attacks. Every other armor just increases your defenses, actually, with one exception, and that one exception is the Wind Cloak. The Wind Cloak increases your wind res by 10%, which is less useful because it's only one element, but it is a higher number. It also has very little defense. So yeah, it's not the best, but it's an option. But yeah, so armor is relatively straightforward. You can use the 4 Dragon Vest basically all the time. Headgear is a bit less cut and dry. So one of the best headgear is the final one, the crown. which has the highest defense, gives you immunity to faint, and 30% sleep res. So the faint res is nice. It saves a few slots on Big Bird's Cone. The defense is very nice, of course, if you aren't using Strange. And the sleep is very, very good because if you're using Talisman, sleep res is one of the things you're vulnerable to. So it saves another slot there. So Crown is quite nice if you just want more status res, and especially if you're using a Talisman. But there are other options here. So the next option is the 4 Seasons Headband. So this one increases Fire, Water, Earth, and Wind res by 7%, which is more than 4 Dragon's Vest. And that's therefore saves 1 to 2 Mealy Apples, which is quite nice. But like the other one, you need Light and Dark res for it to be really useful, to actually save as Mealy Apples, but the res is always going to be nice anyway. So there's that. Our last option is this Feathered Hat. So Feathered Hat increases Love res, and that's its big thing. If you want to increase Love res, you can use this and save Tyrant Turnips, but also gives Dizzy and Crit res, which is also nice. So Feathered Hat is a good option too. So those are 3 options. Crown for status res, 4 Seasons for elemental res, or Feathered Hat for love res. As for the shields, we have quite a few options here. So the sort of main one is going to be your Rune Shield. So your Rune Shield has huge defenses and gives you light and dark res, 50%. 50% is huge, and it's also really good because it's light and dark res. As we said, those two are quite rare. At least dark res is quite rare. So if you use 4 Dragon Vest, 4 Seasons, it's quite efficient. It's quite efficient for increasing your overall slots. You can save space in Mealy Apples. If you don't use this, you'll need to use more Mealy Apples to increase your dark res. This is really the only option to increase your dark res. So yeah, that makes this very, very good for increasing slot efficiency. However, there are other options that are also quite good. One of the best ones is going to be Magical Shield. So Magical Shield is really, really good because it increases your resistances by so much. Poison, Seal, Paralysis, Sleep, and Drain by 50%, which is huge. So this plus your base resistances is basically all of your resistances done. So this alone will make you immune to basically everything. You'll be 99% immune to everything. You can increase that 1% somehow, but you're almost all the way there. And you can increase your fatigue and sick. It also gives you drain resistance, so you get drain resistance somehow as well. So Magical Shield is going to be one of your best options as well. But there are others. So one of the weird ones is going to be your Monkey Plush. Monkey Plush is up here. Love res 50%. Very nice, very hard to get. Saves Tyrant Turnips. And I believe your last option is going to be the Element Shield. So this one gives you Fire, Water, Earth, and Wind res 15%. Very, very nice. The problem is that, again, you don't have any sources of dark res. Again, your only real source of dark res is the Rune Shield, and if you use the Element Shield, you can't use the Rune Shield. So you'll have higher elemental resistances to everything except dark. There's no other way to increase your dark, so if you use this, you'll be weak to dark. But if you don't care about dark, you can increase your others. So yeah, those are your shield options. Rune Shield for light and dark res, Magical Shield for status res, Element Shield for fire, water, earth, wind, and Monkey Plush for love res. Next up, shoes. So do remember that for shoes and accessories, you can use other abilities. Shoes have extra abilities, and if you use them for their stats, you can use them for their abilities. In the case of shoes, their abilities aren't that useful, so it's worth considering these if you want to use them. Some of the best options are going to be Fairy Boots, which have the highest possible defense. And they also give 15% status resistance to Poison, Seal, Paralysis, Sleep, Fatigue, and Sick. Not to faint, not to drain, but to everything else. And that's quite nice. It also has the highest defense, so this is a nice all-round option if you aren't going to use Talisman and you aren't going to use other shoes. Another option are the Pio sandals. So these ones are actually really, really good for a few reasons. One, love res, rare, quite nice. But also gives dizzy res 100%, so you mean to being dizzy, and it gives you dizzy plus 20, and dizzy is very, very hard to build up. So if you want to increase dizzy, this is going to be your best option. The only problem here is that it has a very, very annoying sound. So yeah, you can have to deal with that if you use Pio sandals. I don't like it, so I'm not going to use them, but if you want to use them, you can. So there's that. And I believe the second last one we're going to go through is going to be the sneaking boots. So the sneaking boots actually have a nice effect. So sneaking boots have an extra effect of stopping enemies from seeing you. It makes it hard for enemies to see you, so you can attack them a bit more easily. But it gives you 30% critical. So if you're building critical, it saves you some tablets of truth, which is quite nice. Keep in mind, it gives you minus 20% disease resistance, which is bad. But yeah, if you want to build crit, this is a good base option, and it has nice effects too. And the last shoe is a weird one. So in my shoe video, I mocked this one because I said its effect is completely useless. Its effect is that in some areas of the game, there's a weak wind blowing and this lets you ignore it. It's so useless. But it has some nice stuff. So it gives you, where are they? Yeah. So it gives you 25% knock res and 10% crit res, which is somewhat nice, but it gives you minus 30% fatigue res. And if you're using Talisman, lower fatigue res is good. So yeah, if you're using Talisman, this can actually be really useful. So yeah, you can use it if you wish. Now, last up we have our accessories. Now, accessories are often very, very strong. They have really good effects. So the actual effects they have are very, very strong, and some of them have very good stats. In my opinion, the abilities they give you are much, much stronger than their stats. So I would recommend using these, but it's worth thinking about them anyway. For example, the Courage badge here gives you so much stuff. You can see it here, 500 attack, 150 strength, and all of these status resistances, and 5% crit. It gives you everything. So it gives you so many slots. Again, the problem is that the accessory slots are so valuable that I still wouldn't take these stats for the most part, even if they are very, very good. But yeah, if you want to, this is one of your best options. You can also use the Diamond Brooch. So the Diamond Brooch just does your status resistances. This basically makes you immune to every single status, so it's quite nice. It just has it decreases your, it doesn't give you attack like the Courage badge does though. Another option is the Lucky Strike, which just gives you 100% critical, so you can save a bunch of slots with that. The problem here is if you're going to use a slot for this, you may as well use a slot for a Strange Pendant. At least that's what I would think of. And your last option is your Dew Pendant. This one's interesting because it at least has a nice effect. So Dew Pendant doubles the stats of your weapon if your weapon is a farming tool. Where is it? So that's very, very good if you are using a farming tool. It'll also give you 33% water res, which is quite nice. So yeah, there's that. So it saves some equipment there. What's interesting is that some tools already give you water res, so this is pretty redundant, but it's still nice. Anyway, yeah, so those are basically going to be your main equipment. But there's a few other interesting things with accessories. So this is something I didn't mention in the accessory video actually, so this is important to think about. So basically, recall that we have rarity and level bonuses. So if you upgrade equipment with particular items, you'll increase some particular stats. For weapons, that's attack and magic attack, and for equipment, that's defense and magic defense, mostly. There's an exception in Magic Shield which does nothing, but ignore that. That happens, basically, just don't make Magic Shield your appearance, and you're fine. If you use Magical Shield for its stats, you're all good. Just don't use it for your appearance. But what happens is that some accessories have what we call a rarity bonus type. Have an attack rarity bonus type, which means they increase their stats like their weapons if you level them up. So instead of getting like 800 defense with max rarity, it'll get 2000 attack. And 2000 attack is worth a lot more than 800 defense. So these ones with attack and magic attack rarity bonus type are arguably very, very good. But there is a problem. And that problem is that things with attack and magic attack rarity bonus type can't increase resistances. Which means you can't use Mealy Apples, you can't use Great Crystal Flowers, you can't use Green Cores. You'll have to deal with the fact you have low res, but you can get higher stats, you get higher attack values. And that's a decision for you. So basically this is the sort of the updated table. So yeah, I didn't. This is a bit updated from what I posted earlier. This is the correct one that shows both, which shows all the stats. So anyway, basically there are 5 items that have an attack bonus type. So 3 gloves plus Hero's Proof and Art of Attack. And there are 4 items that have a magic attack bonus type. So 3 earrings plus Proof of Wisdom. Now of these, Art of Attack is actually very, very good. Art of Attack is one of the best items in the game, best accessories in the game, and it has an attack bonus type. So if you want to increase your attack as high as possible, you can use Art of Attack. But keep in mind that your resistances will suffer. So keep that in mind. That's the compromise you'll have to think about. So yeah, so those are the accessories. Now last up, we're going to talk about the weapons. So basically, I think there are 4 weapons that are worth considering. Now do keep in mind that you can use a light ore to change your weapon type. So if you like the stats of this item, the Heaven Asunder, you can use those stats and put them onto a dual blade, for example. But yeah, so the 4 items I think are the best in rough order are the Heaven Asunder, which has quite high attack, but its good thing about it is it has 50% feint attack. So you have a 50% chance of instantly defeating an enemy. This is incredibly good, incredibly useful. So in my opinion, this is the best one. It also has reasonably big range. So there's that. Your second option is going to be your Splash Star, which is a hammer. This item has the highest attack in the game at 14,000. But not much other useful stuff except for, I guess, 35 dizzy. Your last sort of main option is going to be the Legion, which is a spear. So Legion is the highest spear, which has pretty good attack, higher than Heaven Asunder, and has the highest range in the game. So it's good for that at 1.9. It's also non-elemental, which means you can pick whatever element you want much more easily. You don't need to erase the element first. So yeah, Legion is quite good too. And I guess it's a bit of an off pick, but the staff, the magic shot, also has some nice stuff. It has far lower attack than the others, but it has nice dizzy, crit, knock, and stun. So that's worth thinking about. Okay, so these are the weapons, but there are other things as well. There are farming tools, and farming tools have some really, really cool and useful stuff. So farming tools grant full shield bonuses is one thing. So everything I spoke until now is a weapon, and the weapons that aren't short swords, dual blades, or gloves have half shield stats. This can be pretty annoying. When you're making overall sets, that means you want to put as few stats as possible on your shield. You use your shield for things like resistances or crit. But for tools, you get the full stat bonuses, so you get more attack that way. Another benefit is its stats are doubled with Dew Pendant, so its overall attack can be doubled, and this includes putting things like firearm scales. If you put firearm scale on a hoe, that effect is doubled, which is really, really good. And finally, many of them grant 100% elemental resistance, which saves you a lot of slots. So there are all these really, really cool and useful benefits for using tools. So the 3 ones we're going to mainly look at are going to be the Joy Water Plot. This is probably the best one, because it has a unique niche in, in being the only weapon in the game to naturally use your magic attack instead of your normal attack. The only weapon in the game, even staves, use your normal attack for the normal basic attacks. So the Joy Water Pot is incredibly good just for this alone. You also have the Sacred Pole, which has some pretty good range at 1.5, but has some nice other things as well. So high dizzy, crit, knock, and stun. So the Water Pot and the Pole increase your water res, which is nice, but do keep in mind that with the Dew Pendant, if you're using it, you're doubling up on more water res. So it's better than nothing, but it's not that useful. The Hoe, on the other hand, increases your earth resistance by 100%. So you get both of them increased a lot, which saves a lot more slots. But it has fewer useful stats. So keep that in mind. Yeah, so Sickle as well, it's nice for having some high damage and stuff. Axe and Hammer don't really have too much of a niche, but yeah, so those are going to be your main 3 to 4. So that's worth thinking about. Now, The weapons are a bit different from the armor. You can sort of exchange your weapon and armor interchangeably because the armor is all about the resistances and using the rest for stats. Your weapons are sort of in their own thing. So here we're going to talk about the best weapons now, and then we'll talk about the best armor after as its own separate thing in the same video, but yeah, so weapons first. So if you just want to increase attack as high as possible, I've posted this build before in an earlier video. Basically, Splash Star has the highest attack, so you can just maximize that with a whole bunch of attack items. This isn't good, but it's a nice baseline. This alone increases our attack by 21,414, which is huge, but you lose a lot of other stuff. And I want you to think about this other stuff. So personally, this is what I use. So I only have 16,645 attack. So I lose 5,000 attack from the weapon, but I get other things. I get Wind Element, which I think is better. I get better range from these little ore guides. I have better status attack from using this Holy Spore and this Melody Bottle. And yeah, and I get extra drain from Legendary Scale. In my opinion, all those extra things are worth that 5,000 attack, but it's up to you. Other people might have different ideas. So OmniGamer, who is a speedrunner who's helped out a bit with this series, thinks that this is the better build. So what he does is he uses Love Element. He thinks that Love Element is better than Wind Element. And he has higher attack than mine. He has 18,000 attack instead of the 16,000 I had. And he uses 2 legendary scales. So he has higher drain than I do. So there's no sort of best weapon. There's just a bunch of compromises you want to decide for yourself. One more bit of equipment is a water pot build. So keep in mind that water pots use magic attack, so you aren't going to use firearm scales, you're going to use dragon fins. Melody bottles are good for water attack though. But yeah, also keep in mind that water pots have low range, so you'll want to put in more glitter ore guides, for example, but this will make you lose extra attack. This should be a joy water pot, not a rainbow water pot. Oops. But yeah, so this is how you might build a water pot, for example. So yeah, these are the sort of compromises you'll want to think about and what you want to decide on. So with that in mind, let's talk about the armor now. So here I'm going to bring up a bunch of different armor sets that I think are all useful. So first I'm going to talk about 4 sort of normal builds. So these are going to be builds that are made with over 100% elemental resistance to everything except for love and no resistance. I'm going to try and make sure I have 50% no resistance in these. Trying to get close to or above 100% status res to everything except for drain, because I don't think that's useful. This includes feint, so I'll have feint resistance. And I'll try to make sure we have full freedom with accessories and shoes. And after that, we'll max out our attack. So we'll have 4 things, one with crit and a talisman for resistance, one with no crit, and one with no crit and a talisman. Now these are going to be your cookie cutter builds that you might want to change depending on what you want to do. So then I'll post a few examples of things that are changed. So I'll post what I think is my personal build. So in this case, I'm going to be using an item called the Broken Ice Wall to increase my stun. Then I'll talk about OmniGamer's build, which uses Love Res. And talk about how things change if you want to use a pole. And I'll talk about overall what I think to be the best build. In my opinion, what is the best build overall. I'm also going to take a quick detour to talk about how we can maximize our attack or magic attack if we really want to, just for fun. But yeah, so first off, the normal builds. So I'm going to quickly show my... yes, okay, so here we have our set builder. So if you haven't seen this before, I made a set builder. I'll link in the description below. Basically here we can just pick our equipment and pick our upgrades, and it all calculates through. So here is the sort of final build for this. This is the high critical build, and this one has an attack of 30,000 attack overall before adding food. So with food it goes up to 38,000, with the best food it goes up to 41,000, which is a lot. So how does this build work? Basically, so we talked about the weapon before. This is the sort of my personal weapon. So the armor and headgear have a lot of Mealy Apples to increase our resistance, and then the last slots are with cores for no res and firearm scale that are 10-folded for max attack. So these two are very, very similar. The shield has the most interesting stuff on it. So the shield, again, we don't want to put stats in our shield if we can avoid it, because we're going to half the effects from our weapon. So we're going to put instead our left rock shard to increase our resistance. This is combined with a magical shield to get most of our resistances to 100%. The rest are done with the Ultra Toy Herb and Glitter Snapper. Crown gives us faint res. Tablet of Truth, tenfold, it gives us 100% crit. Well, it gives us 90% crit. The weapon gives us the other 10%. So if you are using Heaven Asunder, you need to put a Tablet of Truth in the weapon. But yeah, so the accessory and shoes just has more firearm scales. So yeah, this gives us 100% resistance to every status, 100% resistance to every element, 50% no res, and pretty good attack. So if you want to build crit, this is going to be your best option. There are a few things you can change. You can change out your crown for like the Four Seasons headband to increase your resistances more. If you do this, you will drop your defenses, and you'll also drop your faint res down to 50%. So you can die from that. So that's pretty bad. You can also, for example, swap out your Ultra Toy Herb and Glitter Snapper for other things, like a 4-leaf clover and stuff like that, if you want those. So yeah, there are things you can change if you want. So there's that. This is the critical build. The next build that I'm going to show is going to be the critical build that has the Talisman. So this one is going to be very similar to the last one. So these 4 builds are all going to be mostly similar. In this one, what's changed is that the magical shield has become a rune shield. And the rune shield gives us light and dark res, which is quite nice, because we don't really need that extra stuff. We don't really need the extra sleep resistance, so you may as well just get the extra light and dark resistance from those. Brain freeze. So we're swapping the magic shield for the rune shield because we actually want to be hit by some statuses. So yeah, that's really important. So instead of using the rune shield for more status resistance, I guess in theory you can swap that out for the element shield to get light and dark, or the monkey plush for love resistance. But yeah, so instead of using the stuff to increase that, we're going to use Big Autumn Grass and Ancient Or Cloths to increase our seal and sleep to a high value. Other than that, it's going to be very, very similar. Build number 3. Those 2 builds with crit have very similar attacks. They both have the 30,000 and 20. So next up, we're going to talk about the no critical build. So the no critical builds both give you higher attack, because we aren't going to use our Tablet of Truth. Basically just swapping out the Tablet of Truths for firearm scales, which increase our attack up to 31,145 at base, which is very, very nice. So these two are very similar. Swap a Tablet of Truth for firearm scale. Keep in mind that because these are on the shield, they get half effectiveness, and same deal for the last one. So we have the same deal. Firearm scale instead of Tablet of Truth with the Talisman build. And again, 31,000 attack. So so these are going to be your sort of main builds you'll build off of, and this is more or less what you might want to start from when you start thinking about how to customize it and make it better. As an example for how to customize it, here is mine. So this is the Ice Wall build, using the Broken Ice Wall. So what this build does is it loses some attack. So the other ones have 31,145. I lose about 1,300 extra attack. But instead I get 175% stun. And stun is quite nice. It's the one that's making enemies shake for a bit when you hit them. Basically I get this using a tenfold steal on a Broken Ice Wall, which gets me that high stun. It also gives me the sleep res, I believe. So that extra res means that I don't need to use the crown. Instead I can use Four Seasons to increase my elemental res by quite a bit more. It also has a nice extra space for a great 4-leaf clover. So yeah, it's nice quality of life improvement, and this is more or less what I would use, what I'm going to be using once I start building it. So yeah, this is the Broken Ice Wall. This is a set designed by OmniGamer, speedrunner who helped with this sort of stuff. And in OmniGamer's build, he thinks that love res is quite important. So he builds that up, mainly by using tyrant turnips everywhere. It has relatively lower attack, but it has the higher love res, it has nice DC and crit res, and it still has 100% critical. So yeah, that's another way you can build this. So different ways of building things. Yes, so he has the Timer Turnips, Tablet of Truth on the shield, and still has space for most firearm scales being 10-folded. So yeah, there's that. Now, let's go on to the weird ones. So, poles. So fishing poles change things a lot. So I spoke about how the fishing pole grants you a free 100% water res. Now, because of that, Mealy Apples, the last few Mealy Apples become less efficient, and it ends up being better to use crystal flowers. So I have a big white crystal on my armor, and stuff like that. Big green crystals and stuff like that, which can increase those statuses. But oil can be used instead of big red crystals to increase your fire res as well, which is pretty funny. So there's one over there. But basically, yeah, this gives me much higher resistances, and attack that is comparable to the other ones. It's still a bit lower, but it's very, very comparable. It has high knock, stun, and dizzy, as well as pretty high crit. So instead of building for strange, I could have built for a crit instead. So that's another option. So this is how things change with farming tools. Now, before we talk about the best build, let's talk about maximizing our damage. So all of these things have damage that is around, 30 to 40,000. The best build gets you all the way up to like 65,000, and those are done with different weapons. And I don't think you'll guess the weapon that gives the highest attack in the game. I'll give you a second to think about it, but that item is the Legendary Sickle. The Legendary Sickle gives the highest possible attack in the game. Popping everything with firearm scale, you want to use a Jew Pendant. The Jew Pendant doubles the attack of your weapon, which gives it more attack, and you get full shield bonus, so you get more attack that way. And this gives you 44,000 without food. This is incorrect just because this didn't take into account Jew Pendant in the calculator. It's correct up here. So 44,000 before food, 65,000 with the best food, which is crazy. For magic attack, it's a bit worse, slightly worse, just a few hundred lower. So this uses a water pot instead and dragon fins. So yeah, this is quite nice. What's really, really interesting and good is that if you're taking into account food, when you're eating food with your magic attack builds, you're going to be using gold juice. For your strength build, it's going to be glitter sashimi. But gold juice has a really nice effect in that it increases your elemental resistances by up to 20%. So that's in this spreadsheet where you can see the different foods I put in. So basically, even if the build is fully optimized and fully designed for damage and doesn't take into account your equipment, you still get resistance in this build, which is pretty funny. But now with that in mind, let's think about the best build. And so we think about how we want elemental resistance. Elemental resistance can be built a few ways with Mealy Apple, but as we just said, we can also increase it with food. We can increase it like here with the gold juice. The gold juice increases our resistance by a lot. And it's buyable. You can just buy all the ingredients at high level, so it's very easy to get very, very good. And it increases our intelligence. This means that increasing our intelligence, even for like normal melee attacks, is better than increasing our strength. So we want to use magical attacks. And the only way we can use magical attacks on our normal attacks is with a water pot. This means that the best build in the game relies on using a water pot, which is incredibly funny to me. So that's some extra key points. Like, the best build uses a water pot as the weapon. In my opinion, this is the best build in the game. So, how does this work? Basically, what happens here is it's the same. It's very, very similar. So we're going to be using similar-ish to the pole build, where we're just going to be using other things. We're going to be using like crystal flowers, instead of crystal flowers, instead of Mealy Apples for the last few bits, you get the extra water res. You're going to be forced to use a Dew Pendant in your accessory slot just to have the stats, but if you do, it'll be really, really good. This is a Talisman and Strange build, which means you only have one free slot, which is probably going to go to Art of Magic for the defense. Because you're going to be using a water pot, you're going to have to make your base weapon a staff as well. But what's interesting is that does give you access to staff charges. It lets you use staff magic attacks, which is very, very good as well. So this is good for like just a whole bunch of really, really small and minute reasons. So the Pierce Handlers are going to be good just for increase your Digi and crit. And yeah, this ends up just being like a really, really good build. You just have so much more damage than the others. That's so much easier to build. You have all the benefits of the others. And yeah, it's really, really good. And you have pretty good resistances to everything as well. So yeah. Yeah, Gold Juice is ridiculously strong. And because Gold Juice is strong, Joy Water Pot becomes the best weapon in the game, which is really, really dumb and really, really funny. Okay, so overall here is our comparison for all of the builds. So in gray we have stuff for if you have the perfect food, in blue stuff that you can just buy from the stores, in green if you don't use any food at all. And you can see that here. So the no crit builds have higher damage than the crit builds. My no crit build with a stun has slightly lower, but you know, has the stun. Building up Love Res will make you lose some damage, but it's good for that. Pole has comparable damage to the other stuff. It's very comparable, especially if you have really, really good food, but that's hard to take into account. And the water pot with store-bought food is considerably higher than all of the others. So yeah, at absolute maximum, it's lower than the no crit build, but getting the absolute maximum for the no crit build is very, very hard. You'll need a fish level 10 fish, and that's very, very hard and rare. Water pot, you can just buy everything. So yeah, the water pot build is actually the best. Like, I'm not just saying it. Like, it's really, really good. So yeah, that's basically it. That's basically all the builds. So crit, no crit, talisman or no talisman, a weird stun build, a weird love res build, and poles and water pots. So overall, to sum up, so let's remove that. So overall, to sum up, building up elemental resistance and status resistance are going to be your biggest priorities. After that, you want to increase your attack and magic attack to be as high as possible. There are a variety of different builds you can use to get there. I've listed a few. But yeah, so feel free to change them up depending on what you think is going to be good, because it ultimately depends on how you play the game and how you want to build them. And yes, so thank you all for watching. Next up, I will do a quick video, hopefully released in the next day or two, that will basically just make that last build, make the Gold Juice build. I'll just be making that on video just so you can see how it's done, and if you want to, you can just copy it, how exactly it's done. That needs about like 160 items, I think. So yeah, but you can just follow along and make it. And after that, I'll do a staff build, staff video. So yeah, thank you all so much for watching. I think I hit 300 subscribers just before I recorded this, which I am incredibly grateful for. Thank you all so much if you've subscribed. Please subscribe if you haven't. It would mean so much to me, and I'd be really grateful for it. There's still more factory videos to come, and yeah, thank you all so much for watching, and happy crafting.